Hello, I'm Ari, and well, today I'm not at home, so I'm sharing with you the news of what has happened this weekend. Here I am in the city of gold, the beautiful Jerusalem. Let's get to the point. Israel intensified its offensive in Gaza City over the weekend. The Air Force reported that in just 24 hours, nearly 100 targets were attacked. Tunnels, weapons depots, operational cells, and buildings rigged with explosive traps. At the same time, the 98th Division destroyed Hamas infrastructure in the heart of the Gaza Strip's capital, and the 162nd Division advanced through areas filled with traps and combat positions. We had already discussed how hard it would be to enter Gaza, which truly highlights the challenges of urban warfare. The 99th Division led northern attacks. Meanwhile, in Khan Yunis and Rafah, which are in the south of the Gaza Strip, the Gaza Division destroyed more tunnels and neutralized several fighters. The army had clearly warned El that it would use unprecedented force in Gaza City. The population understood. More than 500,000 people from Gaza have fled the capital of the Strip to the south, seeking refuge in the humanitarian zone designated by Israel. 500,000 displaced people, a figure that reflects not only the magnitude of the attack of what is happening there in Gaza, but also the scale of the collapse in the daily life of this city. While Israel and the United Nations opened humanitarian corridors, a scene occurred that summed up the situation there. Armed Hamas men fired at the international team, stole their vehicles, and used them to block the route. And just a day before, they had taken United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund trucks loaded with infant formula. Here lies the conflict's greatest contradiction. On one hand, Israel, under international pressure, seeks to ensure that food, medicine, and supplies reach the displaced people. On the other hand, Hamas blocks, steals, and sabotages that same aid. The reality is that we're not talking about a leadership concerned for its people, that's obvious, but rather a leadership obsessed with the political and military survival of the group. This detail leads us to a clear conclusion. The real control inside Gaza is exercised by Hamas, not only with weapons, but also by manipulating misery. And that's a battle that's not fought only on the military front, but also in the international narrative. Because while the world demands more humanitarian aid from Israel, few stop to look at who is actually blocking all of this. While events unfold in Gaza, a sensitive discovery was made in the West Bank. The Israeli security forces carried out a joint operation near Ramallah, which is the central city of the Palestinian Authority, located just a few kilometers from Jerusalem, right in the heart of what we call here Judea and Samaria. There, a sophisticated rocket manufacturing workshop was discovered and dismantled. The operation was carried out by the CFDI at the site. 3 people were arrested and an arsenal was seized, including dozens of rockets, 2 of which were fully assembled and ready to be launched against civilians and strategic points in Israel, along with explosives and a specialized lathe used to make them. According to reports, the rocket they tried to launch last week from this area had a range of 10 kilometers. Maybe that may sound like very little, but in this geography, it means putting several nearby Israeli communities at risk, as well as setting a very worrying precedent. It would be the first time that such an advanced level of homemade rocket manufacturing has been reached in the West Bank. And this point is key. Terrorist activity in general is at its lowest level in the last 25 years. But incidents like this one, along with the attack that happened at the Al-Envi crossing a few days ago, which I shared here on the channel, this obviously sets off the alarms. They do this because we're not talking about Gaza but Ramallah, the heart of the Palestinian Authority, where there should supposedly be much more control and much more stability. The question many people are asking is whether this is an isolated incident or if we're seeing a symptom of something bigger that's developing there. A potential uprising could spark new violence in Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank, as it's known internationally. While the military conflict continues, the hostage issue remains one of the war's most painful and unresolved wounds. Yesterday, the Al-Qassam brigades of Hamas published this photo with the 48 hostages who are still in their custody. In the image, each of them appears with a tag that supposedly has their name and says Ron Arad and a number. This name is not a coincidence. Ron Arad. He was the Israeli pilot captured in Lebanon in 1986, whose fate was kept secret for decades until Israel confirmed his death in 2016. By using this reference, Hamas sends a very clear message. The fate of the hostages will be like that of Ron Arad. In other words, none will return alive. The terrorist organization even claimed that the hostages are scattered throughout different neighborhoods of Gaza City and that their lives are not guaranteed as long as Israel continues with the military operation. It was the first time that this type of statement was issued under the name of the Hamas Military Wing Command, which reinforces the suspicion that their usual spokesperson Abu Obeida is no longer alive. In Jerusalem, families of the kidnapped protested outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's residence, demanding their release. Among them were relatives of the latest kidnapping victims, featured in videos Hamas uses for propaganda. And well, these parents denounced that their children are obviously being used as pieces of political pressure. As if the anguish of the families wasn't enough, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, added more confusion. This Friday, he declared that, according to Israel's official assessment, the actual number is different. They claim that at least 20 of the hostages are still alive. These statements by Trump have caused great concern because they not only contradict Israel's version, but also directly affect the morale of the families. Imagine what it means to hear from a world leader that your loved one may no longer be alive while your own government insists otherwise. All this leads to a battle that is both military and psychological. Hamas knows it and exploits it. And Donald Trump's statements, perhaps unintentionally, end up adding to the psychological pressure. Israel and the families endure this with the hostages every day. Well, on the other hand, Egypt has once again made its position on the war clear. A high-ranking military officer told the newspaper Al-Akhbar, which is linked to Hezbollah, that if there is a massive displacement of Gazans toward its border, Cairo is prepared to double its troops in Sinai, transfer weapons, and mobilize fighter jets. In other words, Egypt is not only closing its doors, it is willing to use force to prevent Gazan refugees from entering its territory. And this is not a surprise. The Egyptian foreign minister had already said it on cable news network that accepting the mass entry of Palestinians is a red line that cannot be crossed. They repeat it in all international forums. They will not accept it, they will not participate in it, and they will not allow it. Now then, here arises a very big contradiction that I don't know if everyone is seeing. We are talking about more than 2 million Gazans, all of them Arabs, and for the most part, almost all of them Muslims. And yet, none of the 22 countries that make up the Arab League want to receive them. Well, in this case, it would be 21. However, none of the 22 countries that make up the Arab League want to receive them. Among all of them, the countries of the League, they have around 500 million inhabitants with huge territories, with plenty of resources, but they don't open their doors even to a portion of this Gazan population. The question then is inevitable. If these countries condemn Israel day after day, if they demand that the Gazans be protected, why? None of them are willing to take in even a small portion. This is where you can see that the problem is not just humanitarian. The underlying issue in all of this is political. The Gazans are kept in a state of perpetual disgust because that condition serves as a tool of pressure against Israel. They don't intend to resolve their situation. None of the countries that make up the Arab League are interested in improving the lives of the Gazans. Instead, they want to perpetuate what is happening to them. It is not in the interest of Arab leaders to integrate these populations into their countries because that would mean closing a chapter of the conflict. and many prefer to keep it open in order to continue exploiting the Palestinian cause as a political banner, which is currently enjoying great success in Europe, in America, and all over the world. Egypt, in particular, fears that a massive movement towards Sinai would destabilize its internal security. In other words, they see the Gazans as a potential security problem, and all the other Arab countries seem to agree on this. But they condemn Israel when Israel says that the Gazans could be a security problem for the Jewish state. 1 million people entering this peninsula would completely change its demographics and could become a hotspot for insurgency, something that Cairo is not willing to allow. Other countries in the region share this view. Jordan has hosted 1 million Palestinian refugees for decades. Lebanon lives under the constant pressure of the camps on its territory, and Saudi Arabia prefers to send money rather than supposedly take in its own people. The reality is that the people of Gaza are trapped in a dead end. After what Hamas has caused, having led and pushed Israel into this war, it seems that what they planned for so long is finally taking shape. It doesn't matter that the people of Gaza are caught in the middle, who obviously can't cross into Israel. And needless to say, that's where they had their jobs before October 7th, that fateful day. A large part of the Gazan population used to work in Israel. Due to what happened, Israel closed its doors and expelled all remaining Gazans from the territory. And on the other hand, now that they are there, trapped in Gaza, Hamas uses them as its human shield. They can't leave for Egypt because that country is willing to block them militarily. And you have to look at the fence that no one condemns, which is precisely separating the border between Gaza and Egypt. And they also don't find refuge in any of the 22 Arab countries that, in theory, should consider them their brothers. It's a tragedy that repeats itself over and over again. They are the only people in the world who are denied a way out because their suffering is too useful as a political tool against Israel. And that's the paradox. The world demands that Israel take responsibility for the civilians in Gaza, but remains completely silent when it comes to questioning why the Arab countries themselves don't take them in and give them the help they so desperately need. The reality is harsh. Israel faces not just a ground war, but also political and psychological battles on all fronts.